Welcome. We're sitting here today with Dr. Kiran Karnik, Chairperson of Oxfam India, who is here with us to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed upon in September 2015 by over 200 countries. India is a signatory to the Sustainable Development Goals, and Dr. Karnik is with us to talk about the role of business in helping India achieve some of these goals. Welcome, Dr. Karnik. And we look forward to hearing a little bit more about your piece and your ideas. You speak a lot about the need for civil society and the private sector and government to work together. You've raised issues around taxes and other many interesting issues in your article. But I wanted to just ask you, as a takeaway from the piece, what do you see as the role, how do you perceive the role of business in helping India achieve the SDG goals over the next 5 years?
Well, as I see it, business has become a major part of the economy. It wasn't so 15, 20 years ago. And therefore, they influence and affect a very great number of people. And what they do has even more impact across the board. And that is where one would want to see how and what business does to try and get the SDGs going. So it's a very critical role, it's a very important role, it's a role that has an influence and impact on a very large number of people and on government policy. And that's why I think the business sector is critical to our achieving SDGs as we move forward.
Great. I mean, business clearly has a very important role to play. If you had to think about one issue that stood out for you out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that you thought was most pressing for India to address, what would that be?
I would think health is one of the most critical issues in the SDGs. But if you ask me specifically with relation to the role of business, then probably it has a little more to do with inequality. Because the business role in health is there, but it's a little more limited than that of government. Whereas in inequality, in terms of what business does, what signals it sends out, how it treats its own employees, whether they're contract labor at the low end of the scale or the CEOs at the top end of the scale, and what kind of disparities and what kind of things we send out in terms of signals to society is critical. So I would really look unfairly, not just one, but two. I would think health is a critical one across the board, and the business sector can contribute to that, but more directly in terms of what business itself does and what kind of message it conveys to the broader society. I think the inequality one is critical, and each business may want to ponder over what it does in terms of ratio between its lowest paid temporary workers, not the regular workers alone, and their highest paid employees, the CEO or somebody else, and what kind of ratio is reasonable. There's no fixed answer, it's not an easy one to get to, but I would think some introspection and thought on that would be very good.
As a final takeaway, if you had 3 suggestions for business for 2016, 3 actionable points that they can run with starting January 2016, what would those be?
The first one I would think of is in relation to a recent change in the Companies Act, which has to do with the CSR funding for all the work that business is supposed to do to put in money into the CSR. And I would think that they should take this seriously in terms of ensuring outcomes, not just making a notional one or giving away the money that's required to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund and writing a check and getting done. I think the capabilities of business in terms of their ability to manage, execute, scale up, pick good examples from somewhere and do them elsewhere, which they exhibit so very well in the business environment, can they take it forward to the development environment? And I think that's one big thing in that business can do in relation to how they execute the CSR part of what they're doing. Not just CSR, many of them do things beyond that. The second one I would think in relation to their own work. And that has to do with sustainability and part of the SDGs in some way of how they conduct their business themselves. Not just in terms of the ethical way of conducting business, the transparent way, but also their processes and what effect they have on the environment. This affects everybody. It has a long-term effect on the country, on people across the board, but it immediately has an effect on their employees, their customers, and the immediate environment around where their factory or setup is. So I would look for business to be looking at how they can do their own business in a positive, sustainable way, not financial sustainability, but sustainability on a social and environmental scale. And the third one I would say is in relation to the responsibility of business on the broader scale. Today business has tremendous impact. It's become large, it's almost ubiquitous, it's in all areas. and therefore they must see their own responsibility as extending beyond their immediate stakeholders. The traditional stakeholders have been the shareholders, the employees, and then by extension their vendors and customers. But it seems to me the companies need to look way beyond that and look at the totality of the community around them first. What are their impacts on that community, the people living there, the people who are in some sense connected with the company, though very indirectly. And then for bigger companies particularly, the much broader whole of the country. What are the impacts that they're having? And sustainability there has to do not only with their own financial viability, but the viability and sustainability of the social and economic environment in which they work. The economic environment, the social environment particularly in terms of ensuring that things like inequality and so on are properly handled and taken care of. And of course, the general environment in terms of the physical environment. And I would think these three would be something in 2016 that business can go ahead with as a start on the SDGs.
Thank you, Dr. Karnik, and we look forward to hearing more from you on sustainability.
Thank you.